Hello, and today we're going to have a look at how to make a TwitchBot using OAuth, and we're going to be using a library called TwitchLib. Now, this video isn't going to go through all the cool things you can do with a bot. I'm not going to show a massive setup of how to do a bunch of bot functionality, but what I am going to go through is how to make a WinForm application using C# that will set up that initial connection via OAuth authentication and allow you to get a bot to connect to chat, to listen to chat, to respond to commands, to write to chat, and also so you can make API requests, so you can basically ask Twitch for information. Because you're authenticated, you can get a list of all your subscribers or things along those lines. So that's what we're going to do today. A bit of background on me as well. I'm a game developer, so most of my programming has been in Unity or Unreal Engine. And what that means is my actual plain software engineering skills of writing programs and applications is very, very minimal. So I'm not particularly experienced at this stuff. And so when I went to make a bot for my wife, I wanted to make a video afterwards to try and consolidate all the awkward stuff that I had to learn to make it. So if this sounds like something you want to do, you want to learn how to get that initial setup so then you can build on the bot yourself, this will be the right video for you. And I'll just give you a quick demo of what you should have at the end of this video now. So I'm just on my Twitch page here. And here's the little TwitchLib bot that I've made. So if I press start, what it'll do is it opens a page in my browser. This is where first time you do it, it'll pop up and it'll have a Twitch authentication message saying like, oh, do you want to sign in with your Twitch account? It needs access to like your username and access to view your subscribers or whatever you set up your bot to need. So once you press accept, it'll then go ahead and it'll connect to the chat. You can close this window then. So now that we've done that connection part of it, there's two sides of it. As I said, one, we've got a bot now in the chat, so I can write in commands and it'll respond to it. And then the second thing we can do is I've made a little button where I can click on called subscriber over here. If I click on this, it's going to tell me in this box how many subscribers I've got. And that's just gone to Twitch, asked it for a list of my subscribers and then counted how many it's returned for me. So that's the kind of basic functionality. The job of building on the bot is yours. I just want to give you that initial setup. All right, so let's get started with it then. So I'll close this down and we're going to go ahead and open a new Visual Studio. I'm using Visual Studio 2019, but I'm sure it's perfectly fine to use other versions as well. So we're going to go ahead and create a new project. And we're going to be making a WinForms app. So let me just type in WinForms, Windows Forms application. .NET framework is the one that we're going to go for. And we just press next. And then you give it a name. So I'm just going to call this, what's it, a TwitchLib bot example. Okay, you can call it whatever you want to call it. I'm going to press create now. And that should open up the Visual Studio for us, and we have a wonderful form. It might remind you a little bit of something like Visual Basic if you ever coded in that. And I'll talk you through what we're looking at now. So effectively, you can make an ugly little Windows window, and you can drag on a bunch of buttons, text boxes, and whatever you want to have on it. We're not going to focus on user experience or UI really today, but let's have a look how we can get this window set up how we want it. So first thing, you may not have this toolbox and properties window open. So what you're going to want to do is you can go to View, and you will find the toolbox down here. And if you don't have the properties one, you want to go to Other Windows, and then there's one called Properties window here. So if you go ahead and do that, that'll have the same setup. And the top one up here, this is where you will find the things that you want to drag on to the form and position. So we've got like checkboxes, buttons, for example. So if I drag a button on now, you can see it's created a button there. And then this bottom section, that is where you have the properties of the thing that you've currently selected. So this form, for example, is called form 1 at the moment. If I want to go ahead and make it be called something more appropriate, like Dan's bot. I didn't capitalize my name. How unprofessional. Then I can go ahead and do that. Now, I might want to go ahead and do the same with the button. So I'm just going to go ahead and say this is going to be starting our bot off. But I'm also going to scroll down for the bit where it has a name. And down here it's got something called button 1. We're just going to give it a name. This is going to be called our start bot button. So we're going to click this in order to get the ball rolling with the code when we get started. And the reason I've renamed it is what we're going to do next is we're going to double click this button, and that'll take us to the code where we can define what we want to happen when we click this button. And I just wanted the button to have a more meaningful name in the code. You can resize this window and do what you want with it. It's up to you if you want to play around with it and give it some color and that. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. So double click on StartBot, and it's taken us into a C# file. Great. So this was made automatically because we're making a WinForm application. I'm just going to press Control-Shift-S to save stuff at the moment. Get rid of those stars. Yeah, because we've made a Windows Form application, it's kind of made some class structure for us already. Okay, so we have one kind of constructor in here, which is just initializing the component. Just think of that as something that's going to set up the form for you properly. And then anything else we can kind of set up in here. So we just have this start bot button underscore click, which is effectively the code we want to run when we click on this button. There's a list of events that you can sign up to, and we've just signed up to the click event. But double clicking on it earlier was just a shortcut to achieve that. Okay, so now that we've got our code, we're going to go through and start coding this. There's quite a lot to it, and just a heads up, I'm going to be copying in and pasting in sections of the code. I'm not going to go through and explain everything because I want this video to be quite concise, and quite frankly, I don't understand everything here. This is kind of what I've cobbled together in order to make things work through speaking to people who do know a bit more about it. So yeah, bear with me. I recommend that you pause the video when I paste code in if you're coding along and you want to copy with. So let's go through it then. So when we first press this button, what we want to happen is a few things. So first off, we want to initialize a local web server. Now that sounds a bit fancy, and I'll talk to you why we want to go ahead and do this. So we want to do this because for OAuth to work effectively, we're making a request to Twitch to say, hey, let me prove that I am the owner of this Twitch account, and then you give me a token, and then I can use that token to say, hey, I've logged in, and I can send it to an application to say, look, I've got permission, I've logged into Twitch, okay, so let me do these things. So for us to do that, we need to have a local web server so that we can send a request and receive things back and then process the data that was sent back. You may, if you've done a TwitchBot before, you may have seen that you can go to like a TwitchBot, like token generator websites, and you could get an access token that way. But with the move towards using OAuth, essentially that way can still work, but you may be restricted in some of the things that you can do. And this way we're doing today is a lot more future proof, and it's the most secure way to do it as well at the moment. So this is why I'm going over this way. It was really confusing for me the first time I did it, this whole process. So you know, if you're not into web tech, which I'm not, then don't worry if a lot of this is confusing, and let's just try and get this code done so that you can then do the bit of code that you enjoy, which is probably tweaking and setting up and configuring a bot to do what you want it to do. Okay, so we're going to set up a local web server then, like I said. So let's go ahead and write this function. Well, you can write, I'm going to copy paste it in. So here's the first thing that we've copy pasted in. So it's going to make a web server, which is going to be a HTTP server. Don't worry about includes. We'll sort everything out later. And it's just going to do some setup. And then the thing I guess we care about here, the stuff with our kind of custom code is going to come in this section. So this is essentially whenever we get a request received on our own local web server. So this is when Twitch send a message back to us. We want to go ahead and process what they've sent back to us and do a bunch of stuff. So this is telling it what to do when you do hear back from it. And then the next step we'd want to do is up here. After we've set up our web server, we're going to go ahead and we will, let me minimize these out the way to make it a little bit wider on the screen. There we go. We're essentially then just going to send a request to this URL, and all this does, don't worry about the contents of this URL for now, all this does is it will open up your browser and it will visit the URL that we've just defined there. But the URL is a special type of URL with a bunch of arguments after it, so that Twitch will handle it appropriately and send something back once we authorize that we are the Twitch user, and that we give it permission to have different kind of functionality with our account. So that's what we're doing, setting up a web server, and then we're going to open Chrome or whatever your default browser is in order for us to authenticate. And then it's going to send back the information, and then it's going to do a bunch of this stuff here. So we're going to need to go through and set up some member variables and add some functions in order to get this to work. You see all of these white kind of bits of text here are typically things that haven't been set up properly yet. So let's start with the web server, shall we? So the web server is just going to be, I'm going to, right at the top of my file, before I do any of my functions, I'm just going to, this is where I'm going to list my kind of members or variables, whatever you want to call them. So first off, I'm going to have that server, because we're going to use that outside of this function. So that's why I'm storing it locally. And then we have a bunch of functions that are going to be called in here then. Now, let's define them one at a time. So this first one is going to be our way of getting both an access token and a refresh token. So access token is the important one, is the most important one, which you'll often need when you're sending requests, but a refresh token can be used as well. I can't remember off the top of my head how it is used, but it's a way for you to kind of refresh your authentication without requesting a new access token, I think. But so first thing we're going to do is we're going to request to get those, and we're basically going to parse the information that's sent back to us and store them in two local variables. So let's go ahead and get this function set up to begin with. So get access tokens, let's copy this code in and then we'll talk through it. So it's a little bit messy, this function, if I'm honest with you. But like I tried warning you earlier, don't worry too much about understanding all of the finer details. What we're kind of doing here is we're going to package up all of these arguments into a URL, and then we're going to send it off to try and authenticate. And then when we get the message back from Twitch, we're going to wait for the response from it. And then we're going to read the JSON that comes back, and we want to pull out the information, the access token and the refresh token. Now, there's a few bits of information we need to kind of provide here. So we have the client ID. Now I'm going to set these up as local variables, not local, sorry, global variables, I guess it'd be called. So because we're only setting these once, that's why it has this read-only thing here. But I'm accessing something called the properties.settings.default and then something called client ID, client secret. These haven't been created yet. Now, how this works, this properties settings default, this is a way for you to kind of, you can put like login details and kind of more sensitive information that you want to access in the code, but you don't want to write it in your code. Imagine you were sharing this code with someone else. You don't want to upload your password. So you can basically have a little window that pops up that allows you to set a bunch of kind of private variables almost that you can access via this way. So if you go to the properties section over here, and you should find something called settings, and if you go into settings, double click it, it should open this window up for you. And if I just drag it off so we can see both of them at once. So what I write in here is going to be accessed. Oops, sorry for all that flashing. What I write in here is going to be accessed this way via going property settings default. So if I write in client ID here, and then I'm going to show you later where we're going to get our client ID from. It'll just be some code. And then if I write in client secret, it's also going to get some code over there as well. We'll come back to these a little bit later. But all I've done then is I'm just caching it, so we don't have to write this in our code. I'm just kind of storing it as a more reader like friendly way of reading it, because you'll see we need this as part of this URL. So if you copied this out earlier, and didn't know what all of it was, well, this is the stuff that it's going to be filling in the blanks of this URL with. Now it also uses something called the scope. So I guess we should get that in at the moment. So scopes, when you're getting a token, you send a list of scopes with it. And scopes basically says, what is the list of things that we want this token to allow us to do? So you can have one which is just like write to chat, and that's all it lets you do. So all your bot would be able to do with that token is write to chat. You wouldn't be able to do some other type of things like ask for a list of subscribers, for example. So you can look up a list of these scopes online if you want, but it's going to be a effectively. Let me try and get this fitting on the one page view just for now. So we're making ourselves a list of strings, and then they come in this format where you just give it a list of these kind of special codes that is saying what are the permissions of this OAuth token that we're requesting. Okay, so I've added in the ones that I thought would be useful for what I was using it for. You might want to use these. You might want to go and look up the rest of them yourself. But if you're unsure, you can just start with what I've got. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back on the one line now. Okay, so and that was that extra bit that went into this URL that we were constructing earlier. All right, so the client ID is used there. We noticed that, I'm sorry, I should have included this earlier as well. There's a redirect URL. Let's go and get that written in as well now, just before we forget. So up here, we have our redirect URL as well. So we put in HTTP localhost. Remember, we set up a web server locally that is going to make this request to Twitch and get it back. So that is why we just use localhost here. A redirect URL is basically where it bounces back to. Okay, so let's go to where we were setting up the client ID in secret originally. So let's go down to here. Can you remember we were making up this this URL in order to go ahead and get our access token and our refresh token. So now that we've got this client ID in the client secret and the redirect URL, this bit is done. All right, so we can go back to where we were. This function has been done, and what we're going to have now is a tuple, a pair of a string and a string, which is our access token and our refresh token. So the first thing I do here is I cache what I'm calling the owner of channel access token. This is just the access token. I'm calling it owner of channel is because the way this is going to be set up is it'll pop up and say, do you want to give authentication for this bot to use your account? And then it's going to connect to your Twitch channel as well. So both the bot and the channel that the bot is connecting to, in this example, you can tweak it if you want, is going to be connecting to the same channel. So that's why I've got it's named like that. So we don't have a variable called this at the moment. So let's go ahead and make it. So yeah, let me just get these copied across. Okay, so we have our cached, oh no, I've just put in a blank name there, needs access token, just to define it as something to begin with, but that'll get set after we do a request. Okay, and then if we go to the next line after this, so just so you understand what this is doing, if you remember this was a tuple, .item1 will get you the first item out of that tuple of data, the two strings that we got earlier. Okay, so the next thing we're then going to do is we're going to go ahead and set the name and ID using that information we just got. You can see that we're passing that access token into this function. We haven't made this function, so let's go ahead and do that, shall we? So just going to copy pasta this in. You might notice that it's got the .wait after it, and that's because it's an async task that we're going to be adding in now. I'll tell you what, I'll just paste it above it so we can keep where it's being called in line on screen, make it a little bit easier for us to try and keep in mind what's going on. Okay, so what happens in here is we're creating what we call an API. So this is part of TwitchLib. So TwitchLib is a library that makes connecting to the Twitch API a lot easier, or a lot more user-friendly if you're not versed in this stuff. So the API, you make an API if you want to ask something of the Twitch kind of website. You're saying to it, hey, can you give me this information? That's what we'd call like an API request. So we make one of these Twitch API objects. We set it to have the access token that we've just got. And we give it the client ID that we had earlier as well, that we manually put in via that settings thing that I showed you earlier. Let me get that window back open, this thing. So let me just drag this back up here so we can access it later. And what we're doing then is we're making, the reason we made this API, and it's local notice, so we're only using it within this function. we're basically going to say, hey, can you get me the user of the person who's just logged in? And that way we can get their channel so that we can join their channel, and also so that we can have their channel ID as well, because that isn't something that's very public or easy to get. So that's like a unique number associated with your channel. So we're making a request. We got to wait for it. That's why this is an async function. And then when it comes back, we're going to assign it to these two variables. So let's go ahead and create those variables. So copy paste these in now. So there we go. So yeah, this one is used when we join a channel, and the channel ID, some API calls will request the channel ID. So that's why we're caching it now. We may not use it in, I think we might use it later right at the end, but we won't be using it lots, but it might be handy for some of the stuff you want to do if you add functionality to this. Okay, so now that we've got those, we've set up our name and we've set up our ID by using the access token that we got back. Great, so that bit's done. So next we want to initialize the owner of channel connection. So this is where we're going to go ahead and make effectively, I call it a connection, but this is what they call a Twitch client in the TwitchLib API library. So let's have a look at how this function works. So I'm going to copy paste this one in. Again, I'll chuck it between these so that we can keep an eye on where we're calling it from. Okay, so we're going to do a few things here. First off, we're going to make what I've called a connection, but really it's a Twitch client. But it helps my brain think of it as a connection. This is us connecting to the chat where we can then listen to the chat and write messages to the chat. You don't have to follow my naming convention if you don't want to. So let's make a member variable to store that. So let's go right up to the top. And I normally code in C++, by the way. So if I'm using slightly wrong terminology like member variables and that, forgive me. I don't do C# development much. Okay, so there we go. We've got our Twitch client. So let's go ahead and jump to that. Okay, so we make one of those. We initialize it. This is just how you go ahead and set up one of these clients. And you can see we're passing to it the username and the access token that we've just passed in, that we got via this the last function that we defined, basically. Oh, the last couple of them. And then we pass in the Twitch channel name as well. Great. So that's the first step. And then after that, what you do is once you've got this connection, you're going to tell it, what events do I want to subscribe to? And this is something that's really, like the TwitchLib helps you with here. So effectively, once you've created one of these Twitch clients, you can say there's a bunch of different events that you can kind of hook into. So if I just write in owner of channel connection dot and then on. I haven't got the library yet, so you're not going to see it. Okay, we'll fix that later. But if you were to do that at the end, you'll see all of the different kind of things that you can listen for. And these are just events that we're listening to, and we're saying, right, whenever we connect, call this function. Whenever we disconnect, call this function. Whenever there's a chat command received, a command being an exclamation mark before a word, then call this function. So we're going to go ahead and set up some of these in a moment. But that's what we're doing, is we're setting up all the events that we care about. And then finally, we go ahead and we tell it to connect. That's kind of like why I was calling it that connection before, because now we're connecting and we've told it all the things we care about once it's connected. Here are some other examples of things you can do. You're welcome to pause and look at those if you want. Okay, now these haven't been defined yet. So let's go ahead and define them, shall we? So you can call them whatever you want, by the way. I've given them I've given them all different names accidentally. So do forgive that. You can call them whatever you want. But yeah, I'm just going to copy in the 3 of these quickly. And these are a little bit, it ends up getting messy, all of these events that you're signing up to. But okay, so here's our client on connected. Here's our owner of channel connection. And then we've got our, actually, no, yeah, this was for this log. I've commented this out. Sorry, just accidentally jumped up in the code. That's what this one was for, this log. But this basically gives you a log of everything that's happening during this kind of connection process and people joining your channel. But it can spam stuff. So for now, I'm just going to comment it out. I might show you that later. But it can be good to debug stuff if things aren't working, because you see all of the messages that are logged while it's trying to do your logic. Okay, and then finally we want the bot chat command received. So let me just paste that one in as well. You don't need these kind of dividers in. There's something I tend to do in my own code, but I won't force you to look at them. Okay, so we've got these functions now. We'll have a look at them one by one. So the first off is this bit here. So we've got a client on connected. That's what we signed up to. So at the moment, I've called in a function called log, and I'm just going ahead and saying, with all of these events, you'll notice you get some arguments sent through. And this is part of TwitchLib. It sends through a bunch of arguments that Twitch are giving you on that event. So for example, when connected, you can get there's an argument called the bot username. So you can find out the name of the bot that is just connected to the chat, the Twitch account, basically, that is connected, that is going to be used as the bot. But this log function doesn't exist yet. This is something I wrote for convenience, and I'll explain it to you in just a brief moment. So the log function, we're going to copy this in as well. I'm going to just chuck this underneath these functions. So the log function for me is just a very quick, easy way to write to our console. So our console is this little output window at the bottom, right? So if you're writing the code and testing it as you go, you can just read this. But I'm going to add a little rich text box to the form so that it writes to that too. So I'm going to make something called a form log box. We'll go ahead and do that now. And this is just going to write it to it. Now you can see this looks a little ugly, but effectively you get an error if you try and write to the form log box in this way otherwise. So this was just a workaround that I kind of found in order to write to something on the form. It was causing issues otherwise. So yeah, just copy paste to this. But we're going to have to go to the form and set it up now. So form log box is what I've called it. So we're going to go back to our toolbox. We're going to look for a rich text box. You can play around. You can do it in your own way if you want, if you kind of get a gist of how to do this. I'm just going to create a box like this. And then we're going to go to the properties of it. And I forgot the name of it already. Form log box, that's the one. So we click on this, we go to properties, we look for the name. There you go. Form log box. Great. So we don't need to double click on it. We don't need an event that's associated with it as such, but we're just going to go here. You see this is now no longer white because it recognizes that's the name of one of our items on our form. And all this is doing is adding to the text of that box and is making a new line, and then it's printing a message. We could do it the other way around because this is going to do a new line on the very first line, but right now it doesn't really matter. Okay, so this is going to log it both in that form, in this window here, and also it'll appear in your output if you're running it in Visual Studio. Okay, so the reason I've done that is so we don't have to write this mess every single time we want to log stuff out. So this log function is then going to be called in each of these. So this is just so we can see events in our form. When we connect, it'll tell us, and if we disconnect, it'll tell us as well. So that's what this on connected, we had on disconnected, and then that on log, as I said, that is just something that is called anytime any kind of step happens in this whole process, and it will spam stuff. But if you want to test things out, you can just, as I said, uncomment this line, and you'll get to see all of the different steps as it goes through. Okay, and then the final thing we got is this bot on chat command received, and this is what we want to happen when someone uses a command. So I've just done a silly little example in here, which is saying if the command they've used. So first off, we get as I said, all these events have like special kind of parameters that get passed in with them. And the one that comes with the chat command has something called a .command, and then you can access the command text. So that's the thing that comes after the exclamation mark. And then I'm just making it all lowercase. Then I'm just comparing it and saying, right, if they've written the word banana, then I'm going to go ahead and send this message to chat. So this is one of the key things that you kind of want a bot to do is to like respond to when someone in chat says this, then we can go ahead and make our client connection, which is that TwitchLib kind of client that we made earlier. We can use that kind of object and we can tell it to send a message, and we give it the channel name to write in, and then we give it the message we want it to write. So that's one thing that I've done. The other thing I've done, which you might want to do, instead of having all of your kind of if statements like this, you could go ahead and make kind of like a map of these things. So I've made something called command static responses. So that's something that it doesn't care who says it. It's just going to be a static response to all of them. So let me show you the kind of list that I've done here, or dictionary, sorry. I should be accurate when I'm saying that. So if we go, we'll add in this member by here, our bot commands. So at dictionary here, and you can say the keyword is about, and if they write about, it's going to go ahead and say X is a streamer from Y who loves Z. If the command is donate, it'll go ahead and say this message instead. So this is a dictionary, so you can write all your commands all in one place. That's the idea of it, rather than having to do if statements. So if we go back to where this was used, we can see now it's basically saying, well, if that dictionary contains the command that was just written in chat, then we're going to send a message, and the message is going to be the value of that dictionary entry. So that's another way you can do it. There's plenty of things you can do with this, but that's out of the scope of this video. So, okay, so we've got our functions all set up here. And to go back around 5-10 minutes, the reason we were doing this is, if you remember, all of the steps that we're doing, once we've gotten the authentication token back from Twitch, we have gone ahead and collated information using that, gotten our channel ID, gotten our channel name, and then we used this information that we've been collating in order to initialize that Twitch client thing that we're using. And that allows us to listen to chat, listen to events that are happening, and to write messages to chat. Now, the final thing we're going to do is initialize the Twitch API. And this is another object as part of the TwitchLib, but this is going to allow us to make API requests where we ask Twitch for stuff. And we've seen an example of that already. So let's go ahead and create this function then. So it's not a long one, which is nice. Let me just write it at the top here. So we have initialize Twitch API. So very similar to the Twitch client one, you can see we make a Twitch API. I've called it the Twitch API. I hate that I did that, but I don't like naming variables the exact same name as the class. It can get confusing. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and paste this in here. So we've now got this. We can use this later whenever we want. Just jump back down to that. So we make a new one of those, and then on it we set up the client ID, and then we give it the access token. Now, we're not actually making an API request, but what this means is later in the code, when we do want to make an API request, we've already got the Twitch API object ready to use. So that's why we're setting it up here, but it's not going to do anything other than just get itself ready. Okay, so that's kind of all of our setup that's done here. Once that is done, we're in a state where we can listen to chat, we can respond to certain events that we want to hook into, and we can write messages to the chat as well. So the final thing that we're going to set up code-wise is just a little button so that we can check how many subscribers that you've got. So you don't have to do this. This is just giving you an example of how the API bit works. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go back to our form. We're going to make another button. So remember, it's in the toolbox. You can drag a button in. And I'm going to go to the properties of this. I'm going to call this get subscriber count. Okay, it's a little bit not fitting in. So there we go. That'll look at this wonderful UI design. Okay, and then I'm just going to give this a meaningful name because we're going to make a button click event on it, and I want it to look a bit decent in the code. So I'm going to call this our check subs button. Okay, so double click on this, and all I'm going to do in here then is the following. So don't worry about this. This is something we need to fix an include for. And we're going to do that very shortly because we're almost at the end of the code side of this now. But this is how we do an API request. I'm going to try and maybe split it up over 2 lines so it fits on the screen if you want to pause and copy. So what we're doing here is we're accessing that Twitch API object we made earlier, the TwitchLib thing, right? And then we're telling it what part of the API we're actually using. Just think of the API as a list of different questions that you're allowed to ask Twitch, but you need to use the special kind of directory of kind of keywords in order to access the different things. So we're going to what they call the Helix API within the subscriptions kind of subdirectory, if you will. And then we're calling a function called get broadcaster subscriptions. And this is something that's defined on our Twitch API object. So it knows what it's doing. We don't need to worry what's happening behind the scene. We just need to give it the right arguments. So I'm not going to go through the details of this subscription stuff. This doesn't really do much with it at all. But I've used this in my bot, for example, to go through a list of subs and then add them into a list of validate like who in my chat is a subscriber, so that if I want to do like a subscriber only like raffle, I can only choose from the subscribers, for example. We're not doing anything complicated like this. We're literally just getting the results, and then to prove it works, we're logging how many of them come back. So this is one of these, you can see the dot result. This is some like hackery to allow it to work as like an async task, because this needs to wait. This is going to be something where we're asking Twitch, we're waiting, and then it'll come back with a result for us. So it's going to hang here, and then it's going to carry on and do this afterwards. So that'll handle that. And then the final bit of code I want to do, actually, and we'd need to do this later if we don't do it now, so I'm going to do it while we remember, is we want to close down things properly when we close our form. So when we run this, we want to close our form, and we want everything that we've created to kind of be shut down as well. So before we've gone into, I showed you earlier that we have, let me just pop these out so they stay out, that we had this events tab for the buttons, and we've bound to this click event. Now the form itself has some events as well. So this is the normal bit where you set up the name of it, but if you go into the little lightning bolt here, you can go ahead and you can bind to certain events. So we want to look for the one called form closing, and if you just double click on it, it'll create an event for you. So this basically, when you press the X on the form, or when the form is closed in any way, it'll run this logic. So you might be able to, I've got a comment in here saying you could probably just call application.exit. I think it would do the job as well for you. But the problem is when you close the form, it's not telling the whole application that you've launched, the exe, to close as well. So application.exit might do the job, but the things I do is just stop anything that's running, and then it'll automatically finish the execution of the application anyway. So first off, I say if my owner connection is not null, then we're going to disconnect it. And then this is the important one, the web server. We want to call stop and dispose of it, and that will basically shut it down. If you don't do that and you're testing this, each time you're going to be opening like a new web server, and if you go to like Control-Alt-Delete and look at your task manager, you'll see that you might have like 5 or 6 or 7, or how many times you've opened it, processes running. So yeah, you do want to do this. Okay, so that's good. The next step that we want to look at now then is let's fix all of the compile issues. And basically we're using some libraries. There's 2 things that we need to kind of get hold of. One is a thing that's going to allow us to do the web server. And the second thing we want to get is TwitchLib. We've been using some of it already, but we haven't actually got the library of it yet. So let's go ahead and get it. So you need to go to what they call a package manager. Now, a lot of people, if you've used this before, you probably do it from a command line. If you haven't done it, it's essentially a way for you to just download packages, commonly used packages, like libraries of code that you use in your own code projects then. And I don't know whether it's NuGet or Nugget or however you pronounce this thing, but that's the common one you often see. So we're going to go to project, manage NuGet packages. And in here, this is where we're going to install a couple of things. The first one is going to be the one we use for the web server. So that's called NHTTP. So it'll show you installed by default. If you go to browse, that allows you to look for packages. So we're going to type in nhttp, and there we go. Comes up with this one. Look at the one with the most downloads if there's multiple and you're unsure. And then you just press install. And you see down in this output window, if you've got your output window open, it'll give you an output saying what's going on with this. And you basically just press OK. And it's adding packages. You might see some stuff growing in your kind of solution explorer there. And there we go. We got successful. If check here for error logs, don't assume that it's going to be successful. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then the next thing was TwitchLib, right? So we're going to write TwitchLib. Here we go. Again, look at the downloads. And it's just the one that's called TwitchLib, not the kind of sub domains of that. And we're going to press install. Now this one takes a bit longer, so bear with me if it does take a while. So this has a lot of other kind of sub dependencies within it. So it's going to download not just TwitchLib, but other things that TwitchLib use. So it's not a huge download. It's just to collate them all. It'd probably be like a 30-second thing to pull it down. So don't worry if it's hanging on this step. It's not the end of the world. There we go. We've got our pop-up now. These are all the things that it's going to bring in. We press OK. We press I accept. These are licenses that go with them as well. If you're doing this for something commercial, then you want to care about that. And there we go. It's adding all of the packages. We can see all of this stuff pop up here now as well. Wonderful. Okay, that's finished as well. So now that we've got those, let's fix all of these include issues that I said not to worry about earlier. So if you're not familiar with C# or Visual Studio, you can just press Alt and Enter, and it will suggest things for you. So for the includes, it pretty much will fix them all for you if you just go through and do that. There's probably a nicer way to do it for all of them at once, but I'm just going to go through and make sure it chooses the right one. So all this is doing is adding these includes at the top. If you've got these grayed out ones here, it means they're not being used at the moment. So you can just delete those if you want, if you're fussy about that sort of stuff. Twitch API we want as well. So I'm just going to press Alt, Enter, and there we go. That'll do. This is just a spelling mistake. Well, I wish it wouldn't pick up on spelling mistakes in the same way as syntax errors, but there you go. All right, so does it know what this is? Yeah, it does. Does it know what this is? No. We'll click on it using system.net. Streamwriter, probably not. Using system.io. Scroll through. Okay, connection credentials. Doesn't know what that is. Let's go ahead. Put it in that way. Okay, and these are underlined, and it's a little bit confusing why it is, but the reason is the arguments that come with this event have not been included. So if you actually jump to this, I'm just pressing Alt and G to jump to it, by the way. Oh, that's because I'm using something called Visual Assist. The F12 or something will probably do it for you. But you can see this argument isn't known. So if we just do Alt and Enter here, then we can include the events. That should fix the bit where we were before. So let's just go back up to here. Yeah, you can see that these no longer have a red squiggly underneath them. Wonderful. Okay, cool. Have we got any more? I think we've got a couple more. HTTP client. So Alt and Enter that one. And the JSON parsing. That came with part of the TwitchLib library, this Newtonsoft JSON parser, which is handy. And then finally that subscription example. So every time you're going to use a different API request, you include the kind of the helper function that TwitchLib has to allow you to do it. And it'll give you like a type where it stores, or a struct, or a way to contain the result that comes back from that API request. So again, Alt and Enter, include that, and we should be good. Okay, so just to be sure of it, I'm going to press build up here. It's not going to run it. We just want to make sure that it builds successfully. Great. Okay, so we're almost there. We're not too far away. There's a few things we haven't done yet, though. If you remember, we have this bit, our settings, where this is just gibberish at the moment. So this bit is essentially you need to go ahead and sign into Twitch's developer console. So I think I've got one open here. Yeah, this one's fine. I can use this as an example. But let me just go back to my console quickly. Actually, if I just go to twitch.tv, you can see what it looks like when you go to the homepage. So if you go to dev.twitch.tv, this is the kind of developer side of Twitch. Yeah, I don't know if there's any sign up process, but I'm logged in already. That's why I've got my little picture up here. You want to click on your console. Now, I've got a couple of applications already. I think if you haven't, you just press register your application and it'll take you to a very similar page. You might need to fill in a couple more boxes, but hopefully you can manage it. And if I click on this one, this will go ahead and show you the bits that you're going to be filling out when you do it. Now the client ID, yeah, I'm sharing my client ID here, but that's not super sensitive. Don't worry about it. The secret, however, is. So you don't want to be sharing that with people. So in here, you give it a name. The OAuth redirect URLs, you've got to put one of them in. Don't worry about this one. There's something else I did with my application, but you'll want to put in your HTTP localhost here. Remember we put in a redirect URL earlier in our code. So we're putting the same thing here. And then you can give it a category and then it'll provide you with a client ID. Now it'll also let you see your secret. Now you'll have to click, I think it might show it to you first time, but if not, you need to click on new secret and it'll give you a new secret to use. I'm not going to click that now because I've already got a secret that I don't want to show on stream. So set that up and that's how you get your client ID and your client secret here. So if you copy that in, so I'll put that in my client ID. That's good. So I can save that. And then my client secret, I'm going to have to do off screen because, again, we're meant to keep that bit private, right? So if I just go over here quickly. Okay, so I've gone ahead and pasted that in. I'm not going to show it on the screen for obvious reasons. But we'll jump back into it now. So these now have values. And that has got us to the point now where hopefully what should happen is it's going to make a request to when we press play on this application. First off, it'll open this box. Then when we press start bot, if you remember, that's a button we coded earlier. And we'll just do a quick run through of what's meant to be happening now. So first off, it creates a local web server for us. I'm just going to jump around the code a little bit now to remind us. So this sets up the web server for us and says whenever we get like information sent to us back from Twitch, this is the kind of how I want you to process that information. And what we do is we get the access and refresh tokens from that the data that is sent to us by Twitch. We store them locally for the program to use elsewhere. And then we set up our TwitchLib client and our TwitchLib API objects. We can use the client so we can read chat, listen to chat events, and write to chat. And we use the API so that we can ask Twitch for specific data at runtime and wait for the result. So we set those up ready, and then we're essentially ready to go. Most of the logic you're going to have with your bot is going to be how you handle events. So if I jump into this connection code that we did earlier, yeah, this is where a lot of your logic will end up fitting in, is probably in here. If you're very new at making bots, you can just mess around in this bit for a bit. This bot on chat command received. Now, like I said earlier, there are plenty of other ones, and now that we've got our library in, you can see all the different ones that you can sign up to. So there's loads of different events that might be interesting for you. I mean, you can have something on user left when someone leaves your chat, it writes a message saying boo-hoo, they left my stream or whatever. Not a good idea, but just an example. So yeah, play around with those. This is where a lot of your logic would go and be. And then outside of that, you might go ahead and just have your application doing other things as well and calling into the API so that it can make requests. So for example, I think in mine, I set up a timer. So every like a minute, it would ask Twitch who are the users in my chat at the moment. And then I could use that as part of a mini game, or I could use it as a raffle or whatever it be. So that should be the code all done and dusted. We're going to go ahead and save, and we're going to give it a go and see if it actually works. So first off, let's just build it, make sure it's still happy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to my channel. Let's clear this chat. Okay, and remember, the first thing that's going to happen when we press this start button, I'm hoping this works, by the way, who knows if it does, it opens up this little box, and so I'm just going to open up my browser ready for you to see, and when I press that, do you remember the first thing it's going to do is it'll open your browser and it will basically go to a web address and ask you for authentication. So I press this. Now remember, on your very first time, it'll probably come up with the Twitch like a Twitch branded pop-up asking you for your login if you're happy to give it authentication. Because I've already given this application, this client ID, permission for all of the same, like the whispers and the things we set up in the scopes earlier. This scopes list up here, because I've already given it authentication to do that. It's not popping up for me, but it should pop up for you with a purple dialog box. You press OK. It'll do that the first time, and once you've done it, it won't do it until you change the scope settings for it. So yeah, that is that means that it's now got the authentication token and all that jazz for us. So we can open back up our application. I can go into this, and if I go ahead and write about, you can see it is processing that, and it's giving me a response. If just to kind of prove that, if you want. Let's go ahead and find this. So on here, on a chat command received, let's just put in a breakpoint by here. I'm going to write in, let's just do banana this time. So you can see we've hit a breakpoint here. The command text is banana. It's checking, is this banana? And it's gone ahead and sent this message. And then it's going to check, is it in that list? And it's not in that list. So you can see that it is actually running the code. This isn't another bot that's doing that, writing those messages to chat, and it says bananas are okay. And I think the other one I did was donate, right? So let's try that. There we go. We get a message. It is in this map this time. So it goes, okay, great. Okay, send the message for this. So let's go ahead and see what is written in chat. Open up the window. There you go. It says the message there. So just in case you're new to this or it's confusing, it isn't only responding to the commands I've set up. I could write in pineapple, which I haven't set up. It's still going to hit this. This is any time a message comes into chat that has an exclamation mark before it, and then it will process it. You can see this is pineapple this time. So yeah, you can do with it what you want to do. I'll leave the creative part of this up to you. But the final thing we're going to do then is this subscription thing. So if I click get subscription count, it's making an API request, and there we go. It tells me how many subscribers I got. It's not just printing a number. Let's debug it just to make sure that we're happy with that. So I think it was down towards the bottom here. So here is going to be the bit where we make a request. So let me just put when Twitch send us the data back. Let's stop at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and press it again. So here we go. It's gone. It's got the results, and I can even just look at those if I want. So if we go into subscribers, we can open it up, and it has a thing called data in here, and it has a list of the different entries in here. And if I wanted, I could open them up and see who is the subscriber in question. And this is the kind of that you could go through and process that information if you needed to. Okay, cool. So that worked. And so essentially, I think we're done. We've got our application set up. It's connected to chat. It can listen to chat events. It can write to chat. And we're then also able to query the Twitch API. So yeah, hopefully this has been useful. This whole process has been a little confusing to me in the past. I think you're not going to be able to just build a bot without looking at any documentation in that now. So to build on top of this, you'll make use of things like the API documentation so you can be familiar with what kind of events you can hook into. And I'd recommend with TwitchLib, there's a helpful Discord associated with TwitchLib that you can join. You can ask questions and that if you're unsure of what's going on or if you're stuck on a particular issue. Oh, the one thing I should show you before I finish is that log, the log that I disabled earlier. So when we had our events that we signed up for here, there was one of them called this onLog event. So we're going to enable it this time. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to hit start again now. It's opened up my bot over here. I'm just going to press start. It opens up my browser, logs us in. Great. Let's close those down and look at all of the stuff we're getting this time. That onlog is putting so much information in here. So this is all of the different bits of information it logs during the process of it. So it's joining the IRC channel. There's a lot of this is kind of like IRC because the Twitch chat is done via IRC stuff. You might see some familiar things in here. And then it's got a bunch of information, in here that really it doesn't make much sense. But if things aren't going right, you can look through this log to try and find out maybe what steps are not going right for you. But yeah, well, hopefully it's been useful. If you have any questions, do feel free to write comments below, or you can come into one of my streams on twitch.tv/honestandgames. Or as I said, if it's relating to TwitchLib, you can go to the TwitchLib Discord. And if you want to find out how to solve the problem yourself, you can have a look online, look at the Twitch API documentation and any examples that other people have put online. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. I've been Dan. You've been great. Take it easy. Bye-bye.